All right, everyone, it's 5 after, so we can get started here. My name is Peter Roesselet. If you don't know me, I work with Oakwood Systems Group. I am our in-house Microsoft Channel Manager, and what that means is I manage our CSP program and am the licensing subject matter expert for all things Microsoft licensing here at Oakwood. So let's dive right into it. We'll go over the agenda. So I'll start out. I'll just provide a little background on myself. If you don't know me, we'll dive into the changes with Enterprise Agreement, how Microsoft has ended discounts for online services. Then we'll go on to CSP, cover the new 3-year price locks that Microsoft introduced just a few months ago. Then we'll move on to another CSP topic, the unbundling of Teams from Office and Microsoft 365 suites, and how that has changed over the last year and a half now. And then we'll open it up for Q&A if there's any questions at the end. And yeah, feel free to pop any questions that you may have into the Q&A at any point. I will try to keep an eye on it and answer them as they come up. Okay, so let's move on. So yeah, myself, as I said, my name is Peter Roesselet. I am a Microsoft certified professional, specifically for designing and providing Microsoft volume licensing solutions for large organizations. I've worked specifically in Microsoft licensing for almost 10 years. It'll be 10 years in January, so but yeah, closer than not. About 6.5 of that was with Microsoft's largest global LSP, and the last 3.5 have been here at Oakwood, managing the CSP program and providing guidance to all of our clients. I've supported companies really of all sizes. I've had companies as small as like a 3-person law firm all the way up to 60,000 plus licensed seat healthcare organizations. So I truly have seen it all in some degree or another. I've supported all different types of Microsoft agreement types, EA, CSP, MPSA, Open Value, Select Plus, which is depreciated, but yeah, I've seen pretty much everything. Moving on. So Microsoft Enterprise Agreement, this is probably one of the big ones why you are all here. This is a pretty big change that they just announced, and it does go into effect starting November 1st for all new and renewing enterprise agreements, and it does actually affect MPSA customers as well. So what Microsoft has done is removed automatic discounting on online services products. So they will all have the same starting price regardless of how much you're buying. So if you're familiar with the EA, you'll know there's different price tiers. They go level A, B, C, D. Level A being 500 up to 2,399 seats. Level B is 2,400 up to 5,999 seats. Level C is 6,000 up to 14,999 seats. And level D is everything 15,000 seats and above. So those programmatic discounts, it was automatic discount of 6% level B, 9% on level C, 12% on level D. So those are going away. And Microsoft also offered an additional 15% discount on component, also known as standalone online services products. So that would be things like, Project, Visio, just other online service, subscription-based products that, aren't part of the big like Office or Microsoft 365 suites. So what this means is that now, even if you're purchasing on an EA, even if you're a huge company with 60,000 seats, all of your subscription prices will be equivalent to the pricing that you can get on CSP or even just direct on Microsoft's website. So those are the discounts that are going away. So of course this includes, as I mentioned, all of your Office and Microsoft 365 products, and then those component standalone subscription products. So basically look at it as anything that is purchased as a per user subscription. That is what is affected here, which as more and more companies go into the cloud, that's almost everything that most companies are buying these days. We don't really see a lot of people still buying old school perpetual licenses for Office and CALs and all that. We really only tend to see that still, buying server licensing, maybe. So moving on, the only discount that isn't really affected is for those traditional non-subscription perpetual licenses with software assurance. Microsoft is still offering, standard discounts for that, but, as I said, those are kind of the exception more so than the rule now, very different than it was, 5+ years ago. So yeah, bottom line is there's no longer any price advantage in EA for all subscription products, no matter how much you're purchasing. So really it puts, the EA kind of on a level playing field with CSP in terms of, pricing for all your subscription products. I mean, this is a huge sea change for Microsoft, but I think continues kind of a trend that we've seen slowly progressing over the years. As you may be aware, you used to be able to qualify for an enterprise agreement at just 250 seats. Some years ago, they bumped that up to 500 seats. Kind of pushing out a lot of smaller customers out of the eligibility for that. Granted, they did provide a lot of exceptions for existing customers, but it did lock out new customers, and they have since pushed everyone off of that permanently at those lower seat tiers. And even in the last couple of years here, Microsoft has really started, guiding, smaller customers in that level A range, 500 to up to just under 2,400 seats. They've really been pushing them to go to CSP as well. There wasn't a programmatic discount for subscriptions built in at that level already. So, the way Microsoft viewed it was they might as well go to CSP, gain the support of a partner such as Oakwood to support those licenses, rather than go on an EA where you have to buy, expensive support agreements with Microsoft if you want any kind of support at all included. So, that's kind of my personal opinion, but kind of what I see going on there, and probably what we'll see continue is this kind of push to kind of decommission the EA. I don't see it completely going away anytime soon, but it seems that Microsoft is just continually pushing more and more customers off of it. It'll probably only live on for, level D at some point, those really huge organizations. All right, moving on. Let's switch gears to CSP here. So yeah, back on June 1st of this year, Microsoft did introduce 3-year price locks. They're available to all CSP customers for some select SKUs. So when you purchase in a 3-year price lock, you're essentially committing to the license for 3 years instead of a standard 1 year, as most people buy CSP licenses. And you can either pay that on an annual basis, essentially pay for each of the 3 years up front for each year, or you can pay up front for all 3 years too if you want. So what is included in that? It's Microsoft 365 E3, E5, the E5 add-ons, for security or compliance. Outside of that, it's also available for Teams Enterprise. If you're not familiar, Teams Enterprise is the add-on that Microsoft introduced, which is essentially just a Teams standalone license that came into being after they unbundled Teams, which we'll dive into that as the next topic. But they also have it available for some other higher-end Teams SKUs, Teams Premium, Teams Room Pro, as well as the domestic calling plan standalone. So in order to do the 3-year price lock, there is a 100-seat minimum for any of those M365 suites, as well as Teams Enterprise. However, you don't have to commit all of your licenses if you have more than 100. So say you have 250 licenses, not really too keen on committing all 250 for 3 years, you can commit however many you want with a minimum of 100. And then you could keep the rest in, either in annual or even month-to-month terms. So, it kind of gives you some flexibility to lock in pricing for 3 years, but, still maintain some flexibility. If there's, God forbid, some shrinkage in your workforce, gives you the flexibility to still remove some licenses, at years 2 and at the starts of years 2 and 3. So yeah, that 3-year commitment, it locks in your current pricing, which is the pricing at the time you buy the licenses until the end of that 3-year term. And that applies to both whatever you initially purchase as well as any licenses you add within that 3-year term. They'll still be price locked as well, even if Microsoft introduces an increase. And yeah, just the 3-year commitment pricing, it's the same as if you pay for your annual licenses up front, which, as you may know, back in April of this year, Microsoft introduced a change there, charging a 5% uplift on all annual licenses billed on a monthly basis. So the 3-year commit is essentially taking in that 5-year or 5% discount for paying up front and locking it in for a 3-year period. So, it gives you a little bit of predictability, and does kind of give almost a quasi-EA type, price lock to CSP. And again, this kind of plays into what I'm saying about Microsoft slowly dismantling the EA, by adding, options such as this into CSP for customers that are, on the smaller end of an EA, maybe looking at CSP as an option. So with that, we'll move on to the next slide. I got kind of an example of how this 3-year commit works and what happens. So, all right, so this is an example scenario. We have a made-up company, Acme Inc. They buy 250 seats of E5 on the first of the year next year, and they do a 3-year term which would be locked through December 31st of 2028. So the price is locked at the current 3-year rate of $1,972.80 per license, and they opt to pay annually, so they're paying $657.60 per license per year for 3 years. So we throw in the hypothetical here. Microsoft announces a 10% price increase on E3 and E5 starting July 1st, 2026. So right, smack dab in the middle of the first year of their 3-year price lock. Again, this is purely hypothetical, not something that Microsoft has announced, but just for illustration purposes here. So their annual payments would come due the 1st of January in 2027 and 2028 after that 10% increase. So their annual payments remain the same at $657.60 per license. When their renewal comes along, January 1st of 2029, they will then be subject to the price increase. So essentially, they've deferred that increase by 2 years, and it'll save them $32,880 over that 3-year period. So have kind of a little table here that breaks it down. So the first column, 1-year license, that just shows if they bought standard 1-year commitments and how the price increase would kick in years 2 and 3. Their total cost over 3 years would be $526,080. 3-year license column shows what it looks like there. So same cost year 1, but year 2, since they're locked in, they don't see that 10% increase. So they keep paying the same amount, saving them $16,440 in year 2. Same thing in year 3, exactly the same, save another $16,440. So all in with a 3-year commit, they pay $493,200. Overall savings, as I mentioned, $32,880. And of course, if they added more licenses throughout the 3-year term, those additional licenses would still be locked in at the at the price locked amount from before the increase. Moving on. All right, so next topic here is CSP, the Office and Microsoft 365 Teams unbundling. So what happened is Microsoft unbundled Teams from Office 365, E1, E3, E5, F3, as well as all the Microsoft 365, E3, E5, F1, and F3 SKUs globally. This happened back in April of 2024. It was Microsoft's proactive response to a European Union regulatory investigation that began in July of 2023. You may be asking why this matters if we're here in the U.S., but essentially Microsoft did it globally as a response to this. Just to keep things consistent, especially for larger companies that may have a global footprint and be maybe purchasing licenses both in the U.S. and the EU and, whoever knows where else. So when that happened, the price of the unbundled SKUs was a little bit less than the previous SKUs that included Teams. They disabled purchases of the SKUs that included Teams, essentially made those licenses end of life. And then they introduced Teams Enterprise, which I touched on before. It's essentially a standalone Teams SKU, and that's how you get Teams if you are buying these new SKUs that don't include it. So the cost of the new no Teams SKUs plus Teams Enterprise was a little bit greater than the previous bundled SKUs, so not the greatest situation to be in if you're stuck buying those, but what can you do? So customers that had existing Teams inclusive bundled SKUs could continue to renew and add more licenses to it. The secret sauce was you just had to have one of those active subscriptions prior to April 1st of 2024, and you're essentially grandfathered in up until today. So yeah, small footnote, the M365 business SKUs, business basic, standard premium, they were also made available with no teams, but Microsoft never disabled new purchases that were teams inclusive. So not sure if the European Union just wasn't really focused on those, but purchasing never went away for those. So let's move into what just changed now. So yeah, Microsoft did reach a settlement with the European Union, and they are now reversing the end-of-sale status for all of the Office and M365 SKUs that were bundled with Teams. And that goes into effect starting November 1st, so just in a few days here. So those will be available for new purchases once again. So what happened, how they came to this, Microsoft legally committed to establishing minimum price deltas between the suites that come with or do not include Teams, as well as to pricing Teams standalone at or above those price deltas. And that was their legal settlement with the European Commission that enabled this change, this reversal. So the Office and Microsoft 365 SKUs without Teams will continue to be offered, and we will see some price reductions on them. Surprise, surprise, that rarely happens with Microsoft as of November 1st for both the new and renewing subscriptions of those no Teams SKUs. And I do have some details of that coming up. Teams Enterprise will see a slight price increase. It'll be $3.30 per license, and that will be effective November 1st for new and renewing subscriptions. Customers with the no Teams subscriptions will be able to transition into the ones that include Teams if they so choose, and customers with existing grandfathered subscriptions that include Teams will be able to transition to the no Teams suites. So it does grants everyone a little bit more flexibility, to move in and out of Teams without paying for it. And that was, kind of the crux of European Union's action against Microsoft was, they basically were saying that Microsoft was having an unfair competitive advantage by essentially forcing you to buy Teams, even if you were using another solution, but, still wanted a full Office or Microsoft 365 suite. So moving on to some of those pricing updates that are effective here. I'm not going to read through all of this. It's a lot of information, but this table does cover everything that's happening. So all the suites with Teams will be back, and they will have their same pricing they did prior to when they were made into sale back in 2024. But yeah, it shows some of the decreases for all the no Teams SKUs, as well as the increase for Teams standalones. Most of the frontline worker SKUs were the same, but there is a slight decrease on F3, and the business SKUs as well. The no Teams one are going to see a slight reduction there as well, but the ones inclusive of Teams, again, no change. Here's my contact information. That's my direct line. You can reach me at my direct email as well as my LinkedIn page. Feel free to follow me there. I do plan on continuing to do webinars like this to continue covering both changes in CSP as well as Microsoft licensing, as a whole. So those will be announced out on LinkedIn, both from the official Oakwood Systems Group page, as well as I'll be reposting them. So yeah, definitely follow me there. Again, thank you for your time. Appreciate you attending today, and hope you have a good rest of your afternoon.